So without further ado, I will introduce our first panelist, Sami Benchekroun, CEO and co-founder of Morressier. I think I said that right.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah? Is that right? Perfect. So, my name is Sami, and I'm the co-founder of Morressier, and I'm going to introduce you to a new world, which I like to call new world, and a little bit talk to you a little bit about that. So, just as a jump start, I would like to say that it's all about science, right? Science is all around us, and there's great new discoveries made every day, and we see always the results, right? And behind these great scientific results, there's always great minds. That always go quite a similar pattern, right? They go quite a similar approach in their research process, in their scientific process. And we looked at exactly that process within Morressier. How does it actually start, right? There's a spark of brilliance, and then what's next, right? We see the publication. There's a whole industry about all the final publication. But what's happening actually in the middle, right? Where does the discoveries are actually being made? So we like to look on the scientific process like a wild up and down and then back and forth. There's lowlights, highlights, big challenges in every research process, and I like to kind of show it as a little bit of as a crazy path where there's a lot of mistakes being done. Now that path is quite long, right? So between an idea to the final publication, there's a lot of time that actually is being spent on all these iterations, right? On all that failures that we all are making. And now the big challenge is that actually all of that is quite hidden, right? So all that path, right, from the first idea until a preprint or a publication is not really structured, right? I cannot really get access to it in a very structured way. So this entire research process, all this data that is shared there, there's just not a real structured way to get there. And then there's another problem. Once I have actually access to published content, I need around 15 clicks to actually get to that article that I want to get, right? So for all the researchers and scientists in the audience, this is a tough job for you guys. So and we like to look at really the first process, right? So there is hope, and this is exactly where I would like to dive into together with you. And what we looked at is are there any maybe offline versions of somewhat of a knowledge sharing, right? Is there any way where discussion and discourse is being held, is maybe even formalized? And we found it in, for example, conferences, right? Or in the hallways of a university, right? And there are formats that are pretty structured, and every researcher out there knows them. There's scientific posters, scientific presentations that are presented for conferences. So I think that is a good path to look at that early stage research. Now let's have a look how the world of academic conferences these days look like. And I've brought to you some pictures which I like to share. Right? There's this is one typical large scientific conference. It's about stroke. It's one of the leading stroke associations, and you see paper posters. You see people come in with a USB key presentation and plug in to the computer. So essentially, what happens is that all the dialogue, all the discussion of all these very valuable research pieces they are being discussed on a limited time frame of 1 to 3 day conferences, right? And this is just not one example. It's actually, in fact, 90% of all conferences look like that. So it's a pretty offline world. And for me, coming from a startup world where technology, right, we talk about AI and all these things, well, there's a world that is still offline, and I cannot even use AI on these document pieces. It's just not feasible. And I did, there's one of the largest diabetes conferences, so I just made that joke and run around that, and I was just impressed by 3,000 posters hanging on the wall. So I did a little bit fast forward because it wouldn't be too long. So that's the world where I would like to dive into. And tell you a little bit about us, what we do, to actually maybe be of any help for exactly that early stage research area. So everything that we do are based on two principles. The first one is really just the power of simplicity, right? I'm reading data science, AI, emerging technologies. We start at a very low level, right? The first thing that we do is actually bring things from the offline world to a world that can be discovered, right? An online world, right? Things where this, you remember that picture, is not the standard, but rather something like that, where you basically say, all right, let's give everybody a digital possibility to actually browse through content, not only online, but also on the conferences themselves. So what does that bring us is actually, digital objects, right? Digital posters, digital presentations, digital abstracts, but also the interaction, right? So we know exactly how often has one poster been open, how often one presentation has been open. So we're slowly starting to actually digitalize an industry or let's say an area that hasn't been really digitalized before. And this is the path that we are going. So we talk to universities, we talk to conference organizers, associations, and this is the path that we use. So we give them a very handy workflow tool, very, very easy to use. They invite researchers to hand in their posters, presentations digitally. We offer them an app or a platform where they can also quite easily get access to all the documents on the conference itself. And then we offer analytics, right? So they can improve also the conference. So based on our information and based on all the interaction that we can gather throughout the 3 days, we can actually improve the next year's conference based on data and not based on hypotheses. So that's basically a path, and just a brief look into our product. So we have an iPad app and a platform in the back. So that platform basically gives every research, every conference and every university somewhat of a profile page, and you can jump from conference to conference. So you're not only stuck in one conference, but we're breaking the silos basically. So if you're attending one conference, you can also discover all the content around that we have on our platform. Now, I told you about two pillars that we are basing. Absolutely, I can do that. All right, so two things that we are basing everything on is that power of simplicity. So bringing everything that has been offline online. And then there's this second, and I think that's the interesting one, and it goes rather into the direction AI and machine learning. So we believe that from that offline world to that online world, we can now leverage the online content, the online accessible content, and make it, let's call it intelligent, right? So how do we do that? We use all these new techniques. So we are a big, somewhat large data team based in Berlin, where everything startup related is happening these days. And what we do is we analyze actually every content piece that is being uploaded onto our platform. We segment them, so we segment them by data sources. We have a dedicated set of data sources that we look after in every document that gets onto our platform. We consolidate that, and then there's a data output, right? So we know exactly what happens on all these document pieces. And the next step that we do then, by this process of NLP, is we find hidden clusters in these documents. So the first thing is we put all the data sources in a data cloud, right? So all the data sets of interest for the key players in the industry. And what we then do is, with machine learning algorithm that the next speaker is going to talk more into detail, we can untangle all these complex structures within that vast, that big cloud of data sources. In order to then, and that's the interesting part because it's very accessible, to segment and prioritize. What do I want to know? What types of questions can I ask? So basically our machine that we have built is you can ask all sorts of questions, right? What is the trend in oncology last month, right? What is the difference from last month to last year? All these questions we can answer based on the data set that we have, but not about every scientific output, but on a very specific target, which is that offline on conferences or that early stage area, right? So that's basically what we do. So two pillars. One, the power of simplicity, as I call it, from that offline world into that online, and from online to intelligent. And this is basically our service. So what we look into is we look into universities. Universities work together with us because they are very interested to find out where actually the research is presented, because that's something that most universities don't really know. So we basically give them possibility to get a better assessment on everything that has been conducted at their universities. We have a tool set for conferences, so we do abstract management, poster management, and presentation management with everything that comes with organizing a conference. And then we support also industry to find first signals and trends in science as they happen, not when they are already published. That's how they look like. So again, our product set is always underlying an engine. So everything that we do has basically that great engine that I introduced you to, and it's growing, right? So we are working with more and more universities. We are working with more and more conferences. And the platform gets smarter along the way, right? So we can ask the platform more and more complex questions, which gets very interesting lately. So we have the ability to connect all research pieces from all disciplines, which is also a very interesting idea to kind of take out all the siloed approach of conferences and put everything onto one database and start comparing all the bits and pieces together. So very briefly about Morressier, how much time do I have there? Yeah.
We have about 5.
Very good. Okay, so about us, where do we come from and who we are? So we are a fairly young company. 2014, we started with digitalizing conferences. That was our path in that industry, and then we joined forces with great people from the industry that supports us on a very regular basis. And now we got also external funding, which supports us in having that platform that is very open, right? So we want to open that platform. That's very, very important. We support open science, so everybody, all the researcher can create an account on our platform and can use all the data freely and start basically looking into further analytics for universities and industry and conference. So we're working with partners around the world, large associations in Europe and mostly Europe and North America. But in general, these are the key metrics. So we have over 300 conferences in 52 countries that we are working with, so quite a global approach, and it's getting more and more as we speak. We have around 130,000 researchers that are constantly uploading new documents that are interacting with our platform, which is also increasing quite significantly lately. So the main message that I'm making here is let us all pay attention on that early stage process, right? I strongly believe that there has been a lot of work being done on the right side of that graph, but I think that the first processes, that very early beginning, also for early career researcher, that all that world hasn't been really discovered yet. And what we do is we want to connect all the missing links, all the bits and pieces from abstracts, posters, presentations. We want to kind of create that story, also give access to results that that are not that successful, right? So looking in that world is really the mission, and something that I want to shout out is that there's an area, this early stage research area that needs to be looked at. So what we like to see, and what we tell everybody is that we want to be the barometer of signals and signs and trends in new discoveries accessible at the tip of everyone's finger, right? So, as a brief summary of what I've talked about, and this applies to everything that is actually data related, so we briefly talked about that. So the first one is a clean set of data and a clear source of data and document type helps us to use to get better results from our algorithms. The second aspect is segmenting these documents and really slicing them into all the bits and pieces. So taking out the funding information, taking out the titles, taking out graphs, taking out all these bits and pieces of all the documents in order to then link all the data points together to create new sorts of knowledge and can answer and answer more complex questions. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to get some questions.
Great. Thank you. So we have about 3 or 4, 5 minutes for Q&A for Sami while we are switching out the projectors. Does anybody have?
So I think it's really interesting you're talking about the digitizing of physical conferences. Can you talk a little about the virtualization of the conferences themselves, which is presumably where it's headed?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So essentially, when we started our approach to say, hey, let's put the content online, a lot of conference organizers actually approached us and say, will we be relevant as a conference in the future? And my answer to that was always, we are sitting here together exchanging. This is a digital conference about digital content. So what I always tell them is, I don't believe too much in virtual conference, essentially that you have people all around the world connecting through Skype or Zoom or whatever. I strongly believe that the direct exchange is something that we will be having in the future as well. But I believe that the support of that online world, having a discussion 365 days a year, is something that leverages every conference itself. So when we started, we looked at 3 steps: before the conference, on the conference, and after conference. We don't do that segmentation anymore. So there's a discussion happening, and on every step of the process, you just meet and exchange on a direct basis, and then you go on. There's the discussion happening online, and then you meet again. So I think there will be always that world where we discuss online, and the world where we sit together and chat.
Anybody?
Sorry, I've always got another question. From the legal perspective, when you do the second stage, take your hard copy paper, and then you do your segmentation, as you were talking about before you then, so you're taking from offline to online, you're doing a processing, and before you then produce the end results. During that segmentation, you're taking copyright material, you're changing the copyright material during the segmentation process. Do you then go back to the original author for them to confirm that how you've changed it is exactly what their view was? Or are you then changing it and then going straight to stage 3 without then going back to the original author of the paper to ask them to read through and consent and approve the variation that you've created? Before then, their name is still on it.
Yeah. So it's good. Everything, when it comes to legal, my answer in every case is always being transparent, being very, very transparent. So that's exactly our path. So what we are doing in everything that we do is literally telling them what process that we apply. So when someone uploads a poster, we give them all the options, what is possible and what's not, right? So people can, for example, have a CC BY license by us. They get a DOI, they can sign up with an ORCID, and we tell them also that we analyze and then that we take out all the pieces and map it throughout other content pieces. So essentially, we are asking them very transparently when they are giving us the consent. We do what I described. If we don't, then not. Does that answer the question? Not really, I see.
Yes and no.
But we have just a couple more.
We can continue after that, yeah.
Do you have any ideas how to help researchers to find the right poster to navigate? Because when you have 1,000 posters, you're just unable to speak to the right persons. Yeah. Do you have any ideas how to navigate?
Yeah. Well, that's a question that we ask ourselves all the time, and it's actually the question that, for example, the Googles of the world ask themselves as well, right? How to get to the right information as fast as possible. So our path there was, first of all, you have in this research world this large content of offline posters, right? So to finding that on the conference is, nearly impossible. Now, having that digital doesn't make it easier, but it actually gives you the possibility of having a search, first of all, which is helping already. So all the techniques that we are using, all the machine learning, is actually to provide recommendations, to provide something that we say, all right, you're working on that. A recommended poster that we can give you, or recommended presentation, is this, based on our analytics that we have. But we still give you basically all the possibility to go through the entire database of that conference or that university or within that discipline. So the answer is, it's an ongoing process, and we use machines to support us. But that's the Google problem to solve, right? So we're doing our very best with a great team.
Sorry, can I?
To make recommendation.
Yeah.
How to express this recommendation for
Through relation. So we use different, so for example, tags, right? Every document piece has tags, there's affiliations to it. So we try to match based on informations that we have around that, make recommendations that are very close. And then we iterate. So it's a design challenge as well, saying, all right, I didn't click on that, or we recommended something, the person didn't click on that. Well, maybe it was the wrong recommendation. And then trying another recommendation and then iterating based on that. So it's a fail and error process there as well.
I have a problem. Do you work with corporations, because there's going to be big problems with intellectual property here. They're not going to want somebody from outside to look at their internal intellectual property. Because I know from our conferences, our internal conference, no photography is allowed at all. So you do not have entree into corporations, do you?
I didn't get the
I'm
question
asking
again.
if you work for corporations. I work for a multinational corporation, and we have a lot of posters, etc., and we have internal conferences. But you have no entry into this kind of world because of the intellectual.
We don't use that content then.
You don't work with corporations at all.
We do, and we offer them all the analytics based on their content. But it's very clear. So we
But you
tell
have
them
to cut it off from nobody can. Who has access to that information when it's on your database?
well, only the corporation that we work with then. So there's different segments. So
levels
there's
of confidentiality.
Some content, absolutely, some
Okay.
content types that can be shared,
Okay.
and some people want to actually share because the disseminational aspect is very important. But there are some where it's very confident, and then we don't share it at all.
Okay.
It's very clear. It
Okay.
needs to be. Yeah.
Okay,
We
thank
make
you.
it very clear. And
Thank you.
there's a lot of associations that we work with and organize their conferences where they say this content cannot be put outside. Well, then obviously we don't do that. Very clear.
So I have one question, and then we're going to go on to our next speaker. So you mentioned in one of your last slides the scale or the life cycle, and you said a lot of work gets done on the published side.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for that. On the poster side, how do you handle, for lack of a better term, fake news or fake research?
Yeah. Well, that's a big challenge, and the challenge is so big that not even that right side has really figured it out properly. So So that's where part of my answer lies already, is we try to give indications if that document pieces has somewhat value, whatever that means. So we tell this has been presented at that conference has somewhat of a standing, this document has been interacted with very heavily, therefore it has the tendency to be more reputable. So all these elements that has been tried out on the right side, haven't figured that out properly, we are using as well. So trying to find quality measurements there.
Thank you. All right. A round of applause.
Thank you.